bigotry in general toward any non-straight cisgender white male group, they generate fear. And let me be clear, both parties attempt to play into these narratives to try and win elections. However, it is important to note that there are multiple studies, which I've linked in the description, that show that individuals with conservative policy leanings are also more likely to focus on negative narratives and to have increased sensitivity to perceived threats. In that context, it makes sense why both parties try to use these narratives to win elections. Republicans need to activate every conservative that they can, and Democrats want to win on the margins by flipping center-right Republican voters. Both parties engaging with negative, fearful narratives is also great for the alt-right pipeline because fear makes people want to protect themselves and the things they love. And alt-right ideals are broadly centered around hatred toward outgroups, ultra-conservative social policies, and isolationism and nationalism, all of which can be fostered by the repetition and installation of fear. Leftist ideals, however, broadly advocate for community-focused solutions that are inclusive and perhaps most importantly, new or progressive. That's why the left can't necessarily utilize fear. While the right's goal is to protect itself against perceived threats, the left's goal is to overcome obstacles of fear, to incorporate and advocate alongside groups that are marginalized and exploited by neoconservative capitalism. Instilling fear would mean to shift the blame onto someone else. Leftist movements seek to take responsibility and first create change from the inside. Fear in the way that conservatives
by blaming white supremacists and white supremacy and Western colonialism and billionaires and millionaires and donors and
utilize it is incompatible with these goals, and in the modern media landscape means that leftist ideals are less likely to spread in the public consciousness than conservative ideals. Now the third point. Young people have a lot of problems going on all the time. That's kind of what...
Okay.
Welcome back to the program today. Dr. Steven Hassan, world-renowned cult expert and author of The Cult of Trump. A leading cult expert explains how the president uses mind control. Now, the former president, and also, by the way, now with a new forward by George Conway. It's great to have you on again. You know, we've been kind of talking to and about Trump supporters who we interview at rallies sometimes and other places. And there's this intuitive feeling I have, having read about a number of different cult leaders, that there's some similar mechanisms that are happening here. But as a non-expert on cults, it's hard for me to kind of qualify them. Talk to us a little bit about what you see that would qualify at least some followers of the former presidents as sort of being in a cult type scenario.
Oh, thanks, David, for having me back. I love your show. So part of the thesis of the cult of Trump is, first of all, that Trump has the stereotypical profile of a cult leader, which is what Eric Fromm called malignant narcissism, something George Conway has been promoting in terms of his anti-psychopath pack and everything, to try to say, look, this is a dangerous psychopathic person. We don't want him anywhere near power. So that's part of the cult of Trump. But to answer your question, what I realized was that there are actual authoritarian cults in the cult of Trump. And we're talking about tens of millions of people in groups like the New Apostolic Reformation churches and megachurches. And the media has missed the mark by calling them Christian evangelicals, in my opinion, because I have friends who are Christian evangelicals who follow Jesus and the Bible. And what's different about these groups is they're self-proclaimed prophets or apostles who say, I speak to God, and God told me Trump won the 2020 election. And they use phobia programming, my BITE model of authoritarian control, behavior, information, thought, and emotional control, to create a pseudo-identity that's dependent and obedient on them. And it's because the leaders are saying we have to do what God wants, which is elect Trump. They're following their prophet more than they're following Trump. Not to say that there aren't people who are infatuated by Donald Trump, too, because chapter 7 and 8 have many different cults with...
Wait, I don't know if I'm not just... Wait, hold on. Just as a quick thing. I'm sorry. There's literally no point to doing this, but I'm just curious. How many things has Trump technically just completely faltered on? We were supposed to be day one, Ukraine-Russia war over, decrease in price of eggs / inflation in general. The ultimatum with Gaza failed. We didn't, or I'm sorry, hold on. Did I miss something? Did all of the hostages come back? Did I miss that? I heard that this Trump tax plan included literally 0 of his campaign promises. Trump tax plan did not include, well, and then I'll look this up after. It apparently didn't include the no tax on overtime, no tax on tips, and some other thing that he promised. Oh, did it have to do, was he going to remove taxes on Social Security? Oh, it's unclear whether the measure creates enough room for Trump's other priorities, like ending taxes on tips, overtime pay, and Social Security. Oh, is there any big... I know that there's a Trump tracker. I don't want to track every random thing. I'm just curious. Are there any other big ones that have come up in debates and shit a lot? Okay. All right. We got these, I guess. It seems kind of retarded, but whatever. Okay.
In the cult of Trump. But the point is that when you're in a mindset where you're unable to consider the possibility you might be in error or that there may be information that you're missing, if you're so certain and you know, that's the danger points that I want to urge everybody to step back and go, whoa, because we're human. And it's critical that we have information and evidence to make good decisions.
One of the things I've noticed or thought about is that sometimes we, our correspondent Luke Beasley or someone from a right-wing network will interview a Trump supporter, and they will say, for example, with total confidence, that Donald Trump is currently the president of the United States. Now, we've talked amongst ourselves sort of about, are those claims literally believed to be true by the people who say them? Or is it sort of like, for example, with Jim Jones? There were followers of Jim Jones who certainly repeated, they were on message, they were saying the things, but they weren't saying it because they necessarily believed it. They saw it as how you kind of prove your membership in the group, for lack of a better term.
Absolutely.
Is one or the other, the literal belief versus the I'm saying it to show I'm part of the team, is one or the other more common among cult followers?
So this is a graphic that I have on my freedomofmind.com website. It's in the Cult of Trump. And I have a more detailed one for the Cult of Trump, actually. It's black and white. But most people in any cult are what I call fringe members. They align, but they still have some sense of self, and they may be saying what they want to say in order to be in the in-group.
He's got this laminated, bro. He's ready to go.
Different than the core followers who would kill on command, die on command, do whatever they're told, think that they need to do a civil war, for example. And what I've learned as a mental health professional, frankly, is to treat each person with respect as an individual and actually have engaged, respectful, curious conversations where you ask questions that encourage people to think for themselves. And what I see in the media are people going to Trump rallies, putting a microphone, being self-identified as a media person, and the way they're asking questions is going to elicit a cultic framework. And
is that a defense mechanism to a degree, that they see this person from the media, they're coming in, I perceive them as maybe challenging me or my beliefs, and therefore I am going to recite the things I'm supposed to recite?
Not consciously. So part of what I want to convey to your listeners is that brainwashing is a dissociative disorder. It's literally in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of the American Psychiatric Association as a disruption of identity.
Is it actually? Brainwashing? I've never heard of this before. Oh, Trauma coerced attachment. Identity disturbance due to prolonged and intense coercive persuasion. Individuals who have been subjected to intense coercive persuasion, e.g. brainwashing, thought reform, indoctrination while captive, torture, long-term political imprisonment, recruitment by cults or cults, or by terror organizations, may present with prolonged changes in or conscious questions of their identity. To talk more about brainwash? No, fuck you. No.
When I was recruited into the Moonies 50 years ago as a 19-year-old at Queens College,
the Moonies,
the old Steve Hassan got replaced by the Mooney Steve Hassan. It didn't get erased, but it got replaced. Like a computer can get hacked by malware and it takes over your operating system, the programming is still there of who I was before. And so what I want to convey is that if you attack the leader, the doctrine, or the policy head on, automatic cult defense system, alert, danger, danger, persecution. But if you ask a question with warmth about who the person was before they met the group, what they were interested in, their hobbies, their loved ones, etc., you're going to get more of the real identity. And so what I'm trying to convey to everybody who's listening is if you have a family member, a friend, a coworker who's got taken over by the MAGA influence, be warm, open up doors. If you block them or muted them, say, I've been thinking about you. How are you? I want you in my life. Can we do a redo? And then if they say, well, you were mean to me or you called me names, apologize and say, let's not talk politics. Let's just be together because we want to create an off-ramp for tens of millions of Americans. We need to depolarize this extreme situation, which is largely information psychological warfare that's being conducted on us.
There are some who, even if they don't disagree that there is an aspect of cult and brainwashing that's taken place here with at least some of Trump's followers, they're concerned that when you say this is a brainwashed individual, you're dismissing their agency as well as political motivations to a degree and saying they are merely brainwashed, if that makes sense. When, yes, that may be. So can you talk a little bit about that and addressing that?
1000%. Remember, I'm a mental health professional who was in a cult fanatically for 2.5 years, was deprogrammed. So I speak not only as someone who was there, who believed Moon was the Messiah and God was going to save us from World War III, but I've been doing this work for 50 years with people from a myriad of cults. What you don't want to do is...
This is why I'm happy whenever Hassan and other people attack DGG, because it just strengthens my cult hold over all of you.
Speak down ever to anybody, even if they are the most irrational, conspiracy-laden stuff. You want to be warm, curious. Tell me how you arrived at this. When was the first time you ever heard the name Trump? I'm curious. Oh, I saw it on The Apprentice. Oh, really? What was your first impression? Oh, I thought he was a schmuck. Oh, that's curious. Schmuck. So tell me how you came to start respecting him. I'm very interested in your journey. Help me step into your shoes. So never treat people as objects, put them down, or use the term brainwashing in a deleterious way. And what I want people to understand when I call it the cult of Trump or I say people are brainwashed, it's because it happened to me and I know what it's like. And I agreed to my deprogramming in 1976 after a near fatal van crash to prove to my family I wasn't in a cult and I wasn't brainwashed. That actually motivated me to prove it. And then I learned about Chinese communist brainwashing techniques and my mind started to open up because I saw something to compare my experience with.
The being nice tactic would work if the brainwashing wasn't done in such a way where even if you try to stay off politics, they will continually bring it up. MAGA makes politics your very personality. Sure, but I think, I mean, this is like an interpersonal strategy. Interpersonally, this is probably true. You're never going to like hardcore debate a friend out of something. You have to be a lot more gentler, sure.
Can you talk, speaking of comparing, can you tell us a couple of the tactics that Trump uses that are similar to those in religious cults, but maybe also differences?
Sure. So,
if there are any differences.
Well, so it's very interesting you asked me this because I'm reflecting a lot. The thing that woke me up, David, in my deprogramming after 5 days was the ex-members handed me a speech printed by the organization, the Moonies, of Moon speaking to congressmen and senators. They didn't give me a judgment about it. They just said, read this and tell us what you think, Steve. And when I read it, it was Moon talking to congressmen and senators saying how surprised he was that anyone could think that an American could be brainwashed by a Korean like him. And he knows no American is so foolish. He respects them. Now, I had met with Moon 100 times at least as a top leader, and he always dissed Americans as stupid, idiot, lowlifes. So what I'm trying to convey is the first critical thought I had in 2.5 years was he's a liar. And then when I was like, well, if he's a liar, that means he can't speak for God because God is a God of truth. That means he's not trustworthy. And the whole house of cards fell down. So what I'm trying to convey to you in terms of how to talk with cult members is remember their real self is in there. Most people are followers with good intent, good values, and really believe they're going to help save America. So in terms of your question about what techniques are used, behavior control, information, thought, and emotional control techniques, projection of his own stuff on everyone else, misdirection, the pathological lying, saying he knows more than anybody else, trust me, and literally it fits the model so well. And people say, don't you criticize left-wing cults too? And I'm like, sure I do. China is like one of the biggest cults on the planet right now. It's a political system, but they operate as a dictatorship.
Can we go back to one of the ones you mentioned, which is information control? Because in a strict sense, anyone with a mobile phone or access to the internet has access in a literal sense to all the same information. Therefore, it must be that there is some other way that Trump is controlling access to information. Is it you can't believe what you're hearing and seeing from the fake news media that's the enemy of the people? Is it turning people against other media sources, or how does he do it?
Oh, absolutely. So let's remember fake news, which is loaded language, and don't believe anyone who's critical of us. Certainly that piece. Just remember the dual identity. So the person who's programmed is self-monitoring. One other thing that I haven't mentioned yet, and it's the universal mind control technique, is phobia indoctrination. The indoctrination of irrational fears that terrible things are going to happen to you, whether you'll be possessed by demons or the communists will take over and flay your skin off or something, other types of irrational fears, so that in the mind of a cult member, they can't imagine ever leaving or questioning the group and being okay about it. Only negative things happen to them.
This is one of the reasons why, I don't know if this ties in directly, but this is one of the reasons why I think it's simultaneously it needs to happen, but it's also kind of scary if somebody finally stands up to Trump, because then you shatter that illusion of everybody's going to agree with him all the time, or they have to bend their will to him because Trump is so powerful. And as soon as that, you can see that, oh wait, people can stand up to Trump and it's not the end of the world, and Trump doesn't have anywhere near as much power as he says he has. What does Trump do at that point, you know? I'm curious. So I guess the words of the American president mean nothing. So do we just not care that like Hamas passed their deadline and we don't have all the hostages back? That just didn't matter? Trump just said that and it didn't matter. What did he say? Didn't he say Saturday noon? And then that didn't matter. Oh, and there was another one too. This Doge transparency by Valentine's Day. We never got this, did we? Is this happening, or is it still over the weekend now? Or what was the website that it was going to be? Is it doge.gov, or was it? No, I thought it was a different one. Doge.gov/savings. Oh, receipts coming over the weekend. Oh, they changed it. If this is anything like the Elon Musk auto drive, we're going to be waiting for an undefined amount of time.
So I've worked with so many people in cults who just refused to look at any negative information because they thought it was going to hurt their soul or it was going to harm their spirits. So the self-monitoring happens. One other thing I want to say is that a lot of people talk about how that people are lonely and they have a need for community, and that's how they get into QAnon. Absolutely true. We're social beings. We want community for sure. But what you learn with mind control cults is that your comrades, your friends, aren't your friends if you verbalize a question or a doubt. The minute you do that, you're the enemy, and they turn on you like rabid wolves. And that we see this historically. True believers then turned on by their peers because they're starting to wake up and ask questions. So when you're in one of these groups, you know by the way other people are being treated that if you start allowing yourself to verbalize doubts, same thing in Russia or China, you start criticizing the regime, you're worried someone's going to turn you in.
When it comes to the fear tools Trump uses, the obvious ones seem the violent immigrants from Central and South America, the communists and Marxists, the teachers that will do this, that, or the other thing to your kids? What are some of the other fear tactics he uses?
So it's very important. It goes back to the phobia programming to have an enemy. And I'd like to quote a 1954 book by Eric Hoffer called The True Believer. One of the first books I read 48 years ago, when I got out. He said,
like when you talked to that kid at that university, oh my God, that was so sad. That was such a crazy through line, that story. The University of Texas at Austin, where that kid came up to me. We had a really good conversation on Israel-Palestine stuff. And then I was talking to somebody else, or 2 kids later, he comes back and he's like, don't talk to Destiny. That guy's evil. And you could tell it's because the other people had told him. They'd scolded him for talking to me. And then after we were done with the interviews, I saw he was just sitting like completely alone in the center of that crowd because they'd shunned him for talking to me. Oh my God, that was so sad. Holy shit.
strength of a mass movement, he didn't use the word cults, he called them mass movements. The strength of a mass movement can be measured by its vividness and tangibility of its devils. Right. So if you want cohesion, make a devil. Make it being unsafe out there, right? Because then you'll hunker down and you'll follow the apex, leader who's going to tell you how to stay safe. And this goes back to our early genetic programming of survival.
And so that's the way that Trump is doing it, which is I'll make it so that the violent immigrants don't get you. He will protect you from all of those things.
That's the claim. But of course, he is the danger. And people have to understand he is not doing God's will. This is a lie. He's a tool of political Christian nationalists, New Apostolic Reformation, neo-Nazis. Putin was at the top of Chapter 7 of Puppet Masters, clearly. And so do we want human rights? Do we want women's rights, gay rights, indigenous rights? Do we want the right to read what we want to read, or do we want book banning? Do we want to be able to talk freely about our opinions, or do we need to live in an environment where we're worried someone's going to turn us in and we're going to be cast out?